xenophobic, and clearly, again, the same phenomena. Complete obliviousness to the technicalities and details of scholarship or law. A complete disinterest in subtleties and nuance of the argument. It's if someone wants to seriously learn, for instance, about Islamic law, change the paradigm. If I want to learn about Jewish law, do I go and find the best rabbinic authority, rabbinic Jewish law, and let's be more specific. Do I find the best rabbinic authority that is esteemed within the rabbinic community as a great scholar and read that person? Or do I go buy a book on Jewish law by a student of bin Laden and read that as the authoritative statement on Jewish law? I mean, I think the answer is clear. What's happening in the United States is that people are preferring the literature written by the students of the bin Ladens of the world.
So, questions from the floor? Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering about the recent, well, not that recent, but the shooting by the military doctor, and the idea being that in theory the Army is very good at understanding diversity and tolerance, and it should be teaching its soldiers not to react in a way assuming that all Islamic positions are going to shoot you or anything like that. But I haven't heard how the Army is treating the situation. How it's a learning moment, I would think. It's a complicated picture. Yes, you're right. On the one hand, the Army does have every incentive to be culturally sensitive. Absolutely true. In fact, the military itself was the one who was at the forefront of opposing any suggestion of excluding Muslims from the military because of the facts on the ground is the very heavy reliance on Muslim personnel in Afghanistan and Iraq at all levels, whether as translators, as for intelligence purposes, for even purposes of paying people bounties, where they go off and they arrest someone, turn them over to us, and say, here's a terrorist, and we pay their bounty. And so the idea of stop dealing with Muslims is, raised quite a few chuckles by military personnel as just so absurd. But at the same time, the Army has not found the balance where, to pump up these young kids, and they are young kids. Every time I think of my 20-year-old son carrying a gun at any context, the idea terrifies me, and it should terrify anyone. To get these kids to the point where they can put their life on the line and kill and bear the threat of being killed, it forces the Army to look the other way on a variety of ethos that I've been told are necessary for combatants. Among them, for instance, calling all targets Hajis. This is throughout Iraq, throughout Afghanistan. When you engage the enemy, you say, "I'm engaging Hajis." Now, it's problematic because at many levels, but Haji is a term of respect and reverence in the Islamic tradition. It's for a pilgrim. And as I explained in a lecture quite a few years ago, that there is a memory in the Muslim world with the Crusaders describing themselves as pilgrims. And that the term pilgrim, but the Arabic version of it, Haji, re-emerging in this context was not a very smart politically. And what I was told at the time is that
Yes, but it would, to force soldiers to stop using deprecating terminology has a prohibitive cost. Now, I have gotten involved a bit in that case of that psychiatrist, on government's request. It's an odd case. I mean, they're asking for the death penalty. He's fighting the death penalty with all his might. He's now claiming insanity, which is very difficult to make. What exactly happened with this person? There are various support groups for Muslims in the military who complain about deprecating jokes and taunting and feeling that not trusted and so on and so forth. So it's a complicated picture. I don't think the army gets full mark, 5 stars on it. It sort of degrades more like a C+, B-, in terms of how it deals with its Muslim military personnel.
Sorry, we have another question from the floor. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And even when I hear the word Sharia, I start shuddering because I know that everybody will, from all the discourse that's going around, will only think of Sharia as stoning the adulterous and cutting the hand of the thief, although I know better that it isn't. So what is it really for the average person with all these hullabaloo, even it's coming into our election as an issue? When you say Sharia, what do you want people to understand?
No, the issue is, I think the starting point is not what I want people to understand, it's what people have in mind. Because when I think of Sharia, I don't think of Sharia as the law of the Quran and Hadith. It is Sharia as a legal system is the cumulative, interpretive traditions of legal scholars dealing with actual legal problems involving conflict or resolution of conflicts, of actual conflicts. So it's a cumulative tradition in which technical legal experts resolved a variety of conflicts while negotiating texts. Now, having said all of this, I know I'm sure someone from Campus Watch is here, and they'll sit and say, "What? Say what? What the heck did you say?" And they have no idea because they're not in the frame of mind to understand anything of that subtlety. The way they hear this is blah 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 blah. I don't want to answer the question, so I'm going to say a lot of fancy words instead of just answering. Because they either want things in black and white. History is far more informative as to this sort of the symbolic association of Sharia. For instance, after the Reconquista, Sharia, which was also signified the bad word among the people who were chasing Muslims and going around enforcing the Inquisition and so on, but Sharia had what it stood for. It's rather fascinating. It stood for sexual promiscuity. For instance, one of the big heralds and banners of the Reconquista was to close down Muslim bathhouses. They was always closed except one for Queen Isabella, which was kept privately, because the mythology at the time was that these sexually promiscuous Muslims, they meet in their bathhouses and have sex, have group sex, have orgies. And you find this in the literature written, and you find in our day and age, the idea of associating Sharia with this is definitely odd. At a time when a thief used to be executed, to say Sharia is bad because it cuts the hand of a thief sounded stupid, or people were quartered and broken and so on. So what people talked about in Sharia, or to say that Sharia wants to conquer the world, when at a time when the conquistadors were going around spreading Christianity and converting everyone, again, would not have captured the popular imagination. So instead of saying anything, the term derogatory type of discourse we hear today, Sharia rather stood for sexual promiscuity, homosexuality, 1,001 nights where people are offending God left and right, people having a false piety, where basically the image of those Sharia Muslims, they pray and then after finishing prayer they go get drunk and have sex with their in their harem. That's a very odd image to us today. But the lasting theme is the badness of Sharia. What the badness is shifts and changes. It shifts and changes from one age to another. At a time when child marriages were quite common and people were sent to war when they're 12 years old and 14 years old, to say anything about pedophilia and all that nonsense wouldn't get anyone excited. So it never emerged in the literature. It emerges once there are negative associations that you can attach to Sharia, whatever these negative associations are. It's a socially constructed vision of Sharia by the other. An example of this in the book. It's remarkable to observing the social dynamics of this process. I wrote a book called Place of Tolerance in Islam, and the guy who reviewed it for Foreign Affairs, the whole page, he's saying it's a great book, it's a wonderful book, and so on. Then he comes to the last sentence and he says, but those who want the counter perspective, read Robert Spencer, his book about Islamic intolerance. And I contacted him and said, what was that? I mean, Robert Spencer, you're equating me to someone who couldn't hold an academic job if his life depended on it? I mean, you're equating someone who spent his whole life studying Sharia was a propagandist. He said, well, my editors thought my praise of your book was too one-sided, and that I needed to show balance. And they said, well, you need to show balance. Say Bernard Lewis. Say, I don't know, but what's her name? Cook's friend. Karen. No, not Karen Armstrong. She's not. Patricia Crone. Say Patricia Crone. I'll live with that. But another odd thing is, I was alerted. There's a guy who wrote a book called American Islam. I don't remember his name now. And he has a chapter in which, based on conversations with me. And then a friend of mine told me recently, do you know that in his chapter, he praises you, but then he comes at one point and says, he wondered whether you were accurately representing the tradition. And it's exactly this air of mistrust, this air of, even if we are inclined to be fair, and it shows very clearly with the recent comment by Bill Maher, for instance, to say, well, it can't be that all this negativity directed at this tradition is for nothing. So let me concede something towards that side. And that's quite problematic because it mushrooms from a single entry into a full-fledged hate frenzy.
Yes.
Professor, personally I'm disappointed because I came here today expecting to learn a lot about Sharia, which was the title of the brochure. Mostly I listened to 45 minutes of a litany of the verbal and physical attacks that have occurred against Muslims, which are certainly very despicable and regrettable. But I didn't learn too much about Sharia. My question is, what personally do you envision, or would you like to see, the role of Islamic law in the American justice system?